Mic check 1 2, it's the Y2K Collector, and I wanted to talk about 3 mistakes that I made as a retro game collector. And hopefully these 3 mistakes, or these 3 lessons that I learned, will help anyone who's considering starting to collect, or anyone who's currently collecting but might be making some changes. So the first mistake that I've made when it comes to building a retro collection is selling my retro video games. And what do I mean? This can go all the way back to my childhood, right? Now, of course, hindsight is always 2020, and you can never guess what will happen in the future, right? Like, I don't think anyone predicted that Super Nintendo games and Nintendo games would be worth what they are now, right? No one could have projected that or predicted that. And I think had we all known that this is what retro gaming would look like in 2024, the majority of us would have kept all of our video games, right? We never would have traded them in. But through the years, I have sold video games, traded video games away, all in an effort to either get another game or a newer game, or use it as trade bait, and I've done this even all the way up to this year. I wound up selling some of my retro collection, and honestly, every time I did it, I deep down inside, I felt like it was a mistake, because I have an attachment to my games, an attachment to my collection. And a lot of the games that I have in my collection are games that are a part of my childhood, or are games that I genuinely enjoy. They're genres that I enjoy. They're stories that I enjoy. So the biggest mistake that I've made as a collector is just selling my video games, which is a big part of the reason why I typically do not sell any retro games unless I am absolutely certain that it is not a game that I want, or if it's a duplicate. So I would say that that's probably the biggest mistake that I've made, is just kind of selling those games. And again, it's going to happen. There are going to come times where you are going to want to downsize your collection. You are going to want to add games to your collection, and maybe you actually need that trade credit or that trade bait to be able to add to your collection. But just moving forward, that is one mistake that I am never going to make. All right. Mistake number 2 that I've made when it comes to building a retro collection, and that is getting caught up in the hype, right? And that's getting caught up in the hype of anything. Getting caught up in the hype of buying a particular type of game, selling a particular type of game, playing a particular type of game that I don't have any care for, just anything like that, right? Any kind of hype. I would say that would be my second biggest mistake, allowing hype to influence how I engage with the hobby. Collecting video games, collecting anything, any hobby that you have, should always be personal to you, and it should always be based on what you enjoy and what what gives you the most satisfaction, the most pleasure, whatever the case may be. And there have been times where I found myself getting caught up in certain types of hype. What's an example of that? For me, one hype train that I definitely got caught up in, especially in the early 2020s. So I would say, 2021, for sure 2021, and a little bit of 2022, was I definitely got caught up in the hype of special edition games. And limited edition games. So, and that was primarily with the Switch, right? So like if there was a Switch game that came out and there was a special edition for it with like a big box special edition, I found myself getting a lot of special edition games. And, I've sold the majority of those now. Like I've sold off a bunch of those, and I'm happy. That I do not regret at all, because at the end of the day, a lot of what came in those special editions were filler. A lot of special editions come with filler. They come with coloring books, stickers, Just all types of memorabilia that I'm really just never going to interact with. Even if I happen to open the special edition case, I'm just never going to interact with a lot of what comes in those boxes. So it was really a waste of time for me. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some special editions that are worth it. They come with a particular soundtrack that I really like. They might come with a limited edition action figure that I might think is really cool. They may come with like a mini arcade system, which is really cool. I have some special editions that come with like a mini Game Gear. So when it comes with, or like even there's another one, the Prinny special edition was cool because it came with like a Lego set that you could use to build like a miniature Prinny. So things like that are really cool, like things that you can interact with, that you can collect, that you can build, that you can play, that are, you know, genuine memorabilia. Those are cool. But even with those, there has to be kind of like a limit. So I would say that buying into the hype of like limited editions was something that was a waste of time. I'm glad I didn't get swept away in it to the point where my room was covered with big box limited editions. I realized quickly that what was most important to me were the actual games and playing the games. So I kept it, you know, pretty much to the basic game and kind of started to steer away from limited editions. And I've never gotten back into limited editions since. So that's definitely something that I regret getting into, because I think about all of the other things that I could have got as opposed to spending money on some of those special editions. It was just a waste of time. Okay, and the last mistake that I would say, or the third mistake that I would say as a retro collector that I've made is getting tunnel vision on certain things, right? So there are times where you might get really into one particular retro system or retro game, and while you're out hunting, you're so focused on those games or that type of game that you miss out on opportunities. You literally walk by so many other amazing retro games because you've got tunnel vision on Sega Genesis games or on Neo Geo games or on Super Nintendo games. And so you completely miss the fact that there are some amazing PlayStation 2 games out there, or even PS3 games, or whatever the case may be. And so having tunnel vision, I feel, has also been a mistake in the past. I'm at a point where I'm kind of open and free, and I give myself the room to appreciate anything retro. What do I mean by that? I was at a flea market the other day, and I don't even own a Game Gear, but the dude had some Game Gear games, pretty good deal on them, and I was a fan of those games. And like I said, I don't own a Game Gear, but I still pick them up because eventually, maybe one day, I'll run into a Game Gear. I'm not gonna go on eBay and buy a Game Gear, but I have a feeling I will run into one out in the wild, because I have ran into Game Gears out in the wild before. And even if I don't run into a Game Gear out in the wild, I do have an Analog Pocket, which as long as I get the like adapter, I should be able to play all those Game Gear games on my Analog Pocket. So you know, I just keep myself open now for whatever retro games I'll run into, because there are a ton of them out there. And so just having tunnel vision has definitely been a mistake that I've made in the past. But those are my top 3 mistakes when getting into the hobby of retro collecting, or as I've engaged in the hobby of retro collecting. Let me know down in the comments below what are your 3 mistakes that you've made as a retro collector. I'm going to continue playing a Super Turrican here, and hope you enjoy the rest of your week. It's the Y2K Collector. Take it easy.